Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar channel of the Association of Certified E-Discovery Specialists. My name is Mike Quateraro. I am the president of ACEDS. Today, we are joined by our fabulous partner, BIA, for a webinar entitled The Story of 20 Women Lawyers Who Bonded and Triumphantly Pivoted During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Before we get started, please know that we love questions. We're happy to take your questions. You can submit your questions using the Q&A widget located at the bottom of your screen. All questions will be anonymous. Also, if you'd like a copy of the slide deck, you can download that from the resource widget at the bottom of your screen. Without further delay, I am super pleased and excited to introduce our sponsor today, BIA. Trusted experts in e-discovery for 20 plus years. Learn more about BIA at biaprotect.com. And now I want to turn it over to Colleen Freeman, Senior Director, National Accounts at BIA, for our presentation today. Colleen, please take it away.
Thank you, Mike. We very much appreciate having the opportunity to sponsor this event. BIA, as you mentioned, is a longtime partner of ACEDS, and we're thrilled to say that all of our project managers and sales teams are ACEDS certified. So we're not only a partner, but we're actively involved with the certification process in the ACEDS community. I also, this is a special honor for me today because I get to speak alongside three remarkable women in the industry for this event. In addition, I am a former ACEDS chapter leader, 5 years running for the New England chapter. And so this event is bringing together all the things that I love: ACEDS, female lawyers, the law, and being able to network and speak to the community. So again, thank you for having us. And I'm going to turn it over to Teresa Milano, and the rest of the panelists will introduce themselves as well.
Thank you, Colleen. I'm Teresa Milano. I'm from Woodruff Sawyer. Woodruff Sawyer is a leading full-service insurance brokerage and risk management consulting firm with global expertise. I'm actually a vice president and associate shareholder at Woodruff, and I work out of their Boston office. I specialize in management liability insurance, mostly dealing with high-growth private clients, companies looking to go public, and mature public companies, and I'm also an attorney. Sherry?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sherry Bellitz, and I have to say this is like a networking story extraordinaire because I should say a little bit about my relationship with BIA. I'm a trial consultant. I went to law school 20-some years ago with the founder of BIA, and we reconnected at our 20th year reunion, and we really kind of just forged this wonderful collaborative relationship. So it's really a true networking story from that perspective. I'm a lawyer, I'm a trial consultant, and I help the defense bar and insurance companies achieve favorable litigation outcomes through the intersection of law and psychology.
And hey, everybody, I am Trisha Baxter. I am the managing partner of the Northeast office of Morgan & Akins. We are a defense firm, a civil litigation defense firm. I handle primarily GL matters. I'm so happy to be here today. I love these ladies. I love the group that I love what we're talking about. So thank you for having me.
Well, again, thank you, ladies. We very much appreciate your time today. And I just wanted to showcase the book Networked. This is the basis of our conversation today. And the other incredible thing about not only all the women that came together to write this book, but all the proceeds are going to the National Women's Law Center. And you can find the book on Amazon. And it's just a phenomenal story of how 50 women actually came together, and we're going to get into this when I have the chance to start interviewing Trisha. But the original basis for the book is that 50 women came together on a LinkedIn group to bond during the pandemic and to overcome personal and professional challenges, to support one another, and 20 of the women of that group came together to write this book. And of course, we have two of the main authors today, Sherry and Tricia, who were driving force behind the book. And I think it's really important for our ACEDS communities, where we typically are giving a lot of content around e-discovery, attorney managed review services, and all sorts of practical tools and techniques you can use as an e-discovery professional. Another important component, especially at this point in time when we're all working from home remotely, is to be networked, to be networking and to find new ways of connecting, since we can't meet up at legal conferences or in-person chapter events. And so what we hope to accomplish today is to have you all have more ways of connecting online and increasing your social presence online and making new connections. And these wonderful ladies today will help us do that. So with that in mind, Tricia, I'd love for you to be able to tell our audience today how this whole book came together and actually how your group, Female Rock Stars on LinkedIn, came together. One note I'll say is that in doing the preparation for this event, I looked back at my own LinkedIn and wanted to see when I joined. And actually, I joined in 2006 before I really even knew what LinkedIn was. And it was on account of a women's club called Downtown Women's Club. Danielle Danielson is the lawyer that founded that in Boston, and she has chapters all over the US. And so I am very fortunate that it's a women's group of lawyers that has brought us all together again today, along with LinkedIn. So nice how things have come full circle for me here, and I am thrilled to be with you all. So Tricia, we'd love to have you tell us how this all came together.
Sure. So I had a similar experience. I had a LinkedIn profile, I think since 2008, and it was essentially parked there for 10 years. Like I just saw LinkedIn as a place to go get jobs. I wasn't looking for jobs, so I didn't really think about it at all as something beyond that. So I had the exact same experience. And I'll tell you that this is really what my chapter was about. I go back 3 years ago, which is kind of what started my journey. I won't say the whole journey here. You can read about it. But the journey was really started with business development. And I had been raised in a kind of a lower middle income family where we didn't talk about wealth and we didn't talk about growing businesses. And there I was, a lawyer developing business, and I was starting to challenge myself and my mindset. And I was like, I want to develop more business. I want to bring in more clients. How do I do that? And I turned to the traditional channels of happy hours and dinners and conferences and speaking. And I tried that for like a year to 2 years. And I just wasn't seeing the results at scale. And when I sat down to look at what my efforts were doing, I realized that in order for those efforts to work, I had to do more of them. But I didn't want to travel for 365 days of the year. I didn't want to spend 6 days out a week dining. I have a family. I have a daughter. I enjoy putting her on the bus in the morning. I liked having dinner with her and talking about her school day. I wanted to be present for her and for my family. So I was like, well, this is stupid. I shouldn't have to choose between my career and marketing and business development and my family. So that really led me to, let's try a social media marketing campaign. Let's see what that is. Let's see if I can meet new people and network using social media. And I started that, and about 6 months in, I really had to learn how to do it. And that process led me to start this group of women. I really wanted to bring together women lawyers that were using LinkedIn in the same way that I was, which was trying to generate business, trying to meet new people. They were trying to network. And that's what started the group. And when I was on LinkedIn, nobody I knew in person was having a social media marketing campaign. Nobody was posting or doing original content. So I had to look for them. And over the course of a couple weeks, I found maybe 10 to 15 women that I saw using LinkedIn like me, posting original content, adding value, really trying to use social media to just talk to people more. So I invited all of them in, and then they eventually would invite other people, and they would invite other people, and it would snowball. And eventually, right around when COVID hit, I mean, this is like coincidence, like right before COVID hit, we had 50 women in this group. So we were kind of ready and poised to really pivot when COVID hit. And it was such a beautiful thing. So that started February-ish, maybe before COVID-19. And then over the course of the next 4 to 5 months, we saw this group really take its own shape. It was very supportive. We were there to help each other with their engagement. We support each other's posts. We threw each other's opportunities to speak and podcast and webinar. And it was really amazing. And we also got very personal. So it took on a whole life of its own beyond what I had originally thought it was going to do. And it became so fun, and it was just dynamic. And I think about 4 or 5 months into that, I will give credit to Sherry. Sherry had the idea for the book. She, I think, and she'll tell you about it, but she recognized how special it was. And she said, guys, why don't we write a book? Why don't we write a book about our experiences with the group and our experiences with career and life? And, not all 50 women could do it. 20 said yes, 20 signed up. And it took us about 2 to 3 months to get everything done, written and published. And this networked is the result of that. And what I love about this book so much, it is that there are career-driven, business-minded women that are being vulnerable. They are talking about their struggles. They are talking about things that I think traditionally a lot of women don't necessarily feel like they can talk about. So I'm really proud. I feel like everyone showed up authentically in their own voice, in their own way. And that is such a beautiful thing. So that's the backstory to both of those.
And Tricia, you said something that we were just talking about as we were sitting here waiting for this session to start today. The word pivot. Colleen was talking about how she had a pivot this morning. I had a pivot to do something else. Obviously, the impact of COVID-19 made a lot of people have to pivot, right, in personal lives and especially business, right, where you're not able to go to these conferences, which, maybe you didn't want to go to in the first place, but now you can't. So the light bulb kind of was going off before the pandemic, and then we move into the pandemic, and now you have this platform. But what's really interesting, what I really love to see in this book and reading network or hashtag network is this pod idea and coming together and finding this group of women. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, because I know it's a little bit intimidating, right? Where you're searching for this group online, how do you find these women? So as someone that shifted gears a little bit in my career recently, finding like-minded people, especially on social media platforms like LinkedIn, this pod idea really resonates with me because I would love nothing more than to find kind of this pod that works. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that, because I really feel like that was something that resonated with me.
Sure. So yeah, the finding your group, if you will, on any social media channel, at least for LinkedIn for me, was an active search. It was, I would type in search lawyer. There's no female designation, but you couldn't really do that. But I would look every day. I would just take 10 to 15 minutes and I would look. And some days I wouldn't find anybody. And some days I'd find many people. And then when I found them, I'd look in the comments to see if there were other female lawyers commenting. And then I would check them out. And I think about a month into doing that, I had connected with 10 to 15 women that were doing the same thing that I was doing. And then their network, they would bring them in. And so really the pod was a LinkedIn chat where everybody, it was a group chat, and people would drop the link to their content for the day. And if you were so inclined, you would go in and you would like and you would comment on it and maybe even share it to help boost the engagement. So it was very supportive. And I think for us, I think most of us liked each other's content anyway. So it was kind of easy and it kind of fit together. And that's kind of the operational side of it worked. But if you're looking to network, really to sit down and identify who you want to network with, and then just give yourself some time to find that group and ask. And I even threw out on LinkedIn, I had a post on LinkedIn that says, I'm looking for female lawyers creating original content. And I got so many recommendations. So that's also something that you can do is somebody help me out. Tag people in here that that are creating original content, and people responded. So that's kind of the backstory of that pod.
And Tricia, this is a great segue to bring Sherry into the conversation. I want to actually, since we're talking about pods and women coming together, if I could just quote on page 26, I really like what Sherry had to say. She said, "A tribe of fierce women who embody the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." And I think that's a great way to introduce Sherry. I learned a lot about her and her remarkable way of reinventing herself throughout her career. And no less, she had to yet again do it during the pandemic. So Sherry, could you tell us a little bit more about your story and how you came together with Tricia and the group?
Sure. So my story, I guess, when I look back, and it was really so cathartic and just therapeutic and just a really good exercise to write it out. Even if this never became a book or never became anything, it was just a great exercise for me to write out a little bit about my career and my life, and just kind of making those connections and seeing those themes and seeing what intersected, which is kind of funny because I'm a trial consultant, so that's what I do. Anyway, I develop themes and I make connections, and I just see how things fit together, kind of like the puzzle in a litigation. But so I wrote out my career, and I noticed that I had pivots every time there was some kind of catastrophic disaster. I would pivot. I wouldn't have known this if I would have just been talking to a friend or something like that. But when I actually sat and wrote it down, I realized my first career pivot was after 9/11. I was working downtown by the World Trade Center. I was actually taking depositions on the 68th floor of the World Trade Center there. But for the grace of God, on that Tuesday, the 11th, we had a day off from depositions. And really, after 9/11 happened, I just kind of reevaluated my life, my career, what I wanted out of my career. And in the back of my mind, and I knew this was something I always wanted to do, is I always wanted to pursue some type of graduate study in psychology. And this seemed like a really good time to do it. Not necessarily because there was this disaster going on, but it was really just more a mental, emotional thing. I said, you know what? I don't want to be at this firm in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. And I think I want to do something completely different. So that's when I took the opportunity to kind of sketch out a plan. And I went in-house to AIG. And I'm just saying AIG because anytime there's an insurance-related audience, there's always someone from AIG who worked at AIG. So shout out to AIG. It was like a wonderful 15 years of my life. And I went back to school at night to study forensic psychology with a concentration in jury research and jury science. And it was just a dream that I always had. And it was like I was living the dream. I loved my job at AIG during the day. I loved thinking I was in CSI every night with this. I was in classes with hostage negotiators and FBI profilers. I just really felt like I was living the life. So I made that pivot after 9/11. Then I had a lot of personal trauma in my life. I'm very open about it. I wrote about it in the book, and I talk about my fertility struggles and struggles with IVF and recurrent pregnancy loss, and really kind of how that threw my career and my secondary education for a loop. And I had to once again pivot and make some decisions. And I decided to pursue some really invasive medical treatments while I kept that day job in insurance. And I just kind of put school to the side, didn't finish it up at that point. And that was kind of my other pivot. Then when I ended up having my twins many years later, I made another pivot based on what was going on corporately and decided to pursue that career that I always wanted to in trial consulting. And it was through a chance meeting, actually a chance meeting on LinkedIn of all things, that I got that opportunity. So once again, a pivot. Once again, I was living the dream. I was working at a trial consulting company. I loved what I was doing every single day. I could never sleep at night because the ideas were just in my head, and I just was like really passionate about my work. I had all these speaking engagements lined up where I was getting to explain how to apply psychology to litigation, to litigators. I had 10 speaking engagements in 3 cities, and they were all scheduled end of March 2020. So needless to say, I appeared on Trisha's vlog, her podcast, The Defense Never Rests. Excellent podcast. Plug for Trisha and her firm and the podcast. I appeared on the podcast March 10th of 2020. And then right after that, the world shut down. The speaking engagements were gone. My job was gone. There were no in-person voir dires. There were no in-person trials. The legal industry was kind of like really figuring out what to do. We hadn't even gotten to a point where virtual trials were a possibility. So I kind of sat down. I felt like really sorry for myself for a day, and I felt sorry for myself. I figured out unemployment. And then after that day, I took a bunch of index cards. You could tell I'm a Gen Xer. I took a bunch of index cards and I sketched out a business plan on those index cards. I called the only millennial person I know, who was the guy that worked at my gym, who I figured was also unemployed. And I said, Brian, do you know how to design a website? You know, you're a millennial, you know how to do that, right? And he said, sure. And I said, well, I have these index cards. And he's like, can you screen share? And I'm like, Brian, we have to talk about this over the phone. So anyway, off and running. I got an invitation from Trisha around the same time to join this networking group. I'm thinking, like, networking group? Are you kidding? I'm like, I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm teaching. I'm like, what am I doing with a networking group? And little did I know, down the rabbit hole I went. This changed my life. Trisha changed my life. These women changed my life. And like Trisha said, they were just giving opportunities from every which angle. When I told them I was I think I'm starting a business. I have a side hustle. I'm maybe starting a business. And they were like, come on my podcast, come on my show, or I'm doing a boot camp for lawyers. Come talk to us. And come write an article with me. And through all that content marketing, I'll call it content marketing, through LinkedIn and through all of that content marketing, it gave me a voice, and people started calling me, and they started, I got my first trial consulting contract that summer. And it was just it was off. And I realized, just a lot about myself. I realized that how much of a difference people could make in my life when we all banded together and helped each other, and we didn't compete, we collaborated. They gave me a lot of self-confidence. They showed me that I had a voice. And also, with respect to business development, I really learned a valuable lesson of, I'm not going to show you my products. I'm not going to show you I could do this, or I did a mock trial here, or I did a focus group there. I am going to teach you. I'm going to teach you. I am going to serve you. I'm not going to sell you. And that's my business philosophy. And it was never something I was able to do or use before. I was always in a position where I had to bring in business rather quickly. But this really let me show what I know about applying psychology to litigation and getting people excited about it. And now all of my calls are people who are calling me because they're just as excited, and I've kind of showed them what I know. So I really also learned a different way to develop business. So that's that's my story. That's my short story.
It's a great story, Sherry. And I know I'm a big fan of your LinkedIn posts, and just because I love the 80s, that has nothing to do with it. But it's definitely a great way to teaching. But I think it starts, and one of the themes in your chapter is tomorrow is promised to no one. And obviously the 9/11 and the constant pivoting, it's a simple statement, but it's a profound reminder, right? If you really think about that and keep in mind. Starting a new business during the pandemic, constantly having to pivot. But I think the biggest, kind of takeaway here is finding your voice. And that's something that I know as a female I've struggled with. I've been the only female in a room many times. How has that, if you look back, how has that kind of helped you now as you're looking forward and we're coming kind of hopefully out of this pandemic? How is that helping you in the business? Because I know it's taking me years to try and figure out my voice. And I feel like that is a big component here to maybe where you've been able to kind of have your success.
Sure. I think a lot of it goes back to what Tricia was saying about authenticity. And I had always worked, I'd worked at a firm, I'd worked at a large corporation, kind of corporate America. I'd always worked at companies, and I'm not saying I didn't have my voice or my personality, but there was always a little, oh, you're a little too outrageous in your writing, or, oh, you're a little too out there with your quotations. And there was always a little bit, and I probably let myself be a little bit stifled because I thought, I'm not the boss. They're the boss. They know. It wasn't about not liking my material. I mean, it wasn't about like, oh, you can't like put this on LinkedIn. It was just about, oh, why don't you tone this down? You seem a little bit like this is a little bit out there. But when I went out on my own, I really decided to just be who I am. And my first post was about New York City closing down. It was late March, and everything was closing down in New York City, and it was very depressing. You just heard ambulances at night. There was a morgue across the street from my apartment, and I really just wanted to write a love letter to my city. I've lived here 25 years. I love this city, and I just sat down. I didn't even draft it in a Word document. I drafted it in LinkedIn, and it was just a love letter, how I felt about what was going on. And I was amazed at the responses. And it wasn't just, I mean, I didn't really have friends on LinkedIn at that point, but it was like, executives from companies and like really corporate people and lawyers, and people were, it was resonating. And it gave me not just confidence, but it just gave me a feeling that, you know what? It's okay to be real. It's okay to be yourself. It's okay to say, you know what? I really miss Times Square, and I want nothing more to be back in like a big, like horrible crowd in Times Square. And this is, what I miss about it. And this is what I miss about that packed subway in New York City. So then when I started posting about what I was doing, and I was trying to teach psychological concepts and apply them to litigation, I said, you know what? Like, I'm going to tell funny, embarrassing stories about myself. I'm going to talk about like some crazy outfits that I was wearing in the 1990s as I was like walking into my law school. I'm going to, talk about music. I love music. I'm going to set litigation to lyrics and, do a Pat Benatar, litigation's a battlefield. And I'm going to just teach by doing what I know how to do, which is really just make things fun and make it entertaining, and no one's going to redline it and no one's going to track change it. And this is just me unplugged. And, if you don't like it, and I mean, who's not going to like Pat Benatar, really? But If you don't like it, you don't like it. But if you do like it, you're going to so get it. And we are going to be just besties. And that's what happened. I found my circle of people who love. Today I posted about Aerosmith and, some guys talking about his record albums. I'm like, we're going to be friends for life. The fact that you said albums, like you're in. Okay, Bill, you're cool. So I just found my voice like that just by being myself.
And Sherry, I wanted to ask you, especially with your background in psychology, I know that during COVID, especially in the legal field, women have been hit particularly hard. And there's been somewhat of a departure from different levels of physicians. And I want to be able to speak broadly to our whole audience. We have a number of paralegals and other female professionals, as well as male professionals that are attending today. Would you be able to speak to why you think the pandemic may have caused more hardships for women in the profession, and what some tips for our audience that might help them with being able to get more connected and across different geographic areas. LinkedIn is a great forum and it's brought all of you together. But are there additional things that you might recommend that people can do? And this question is also for Tricia as well.
Sure. So I'd like to say, and we've all seen the articles and we've seen the studies, that women have been disproportionately affected in the workforce, and just really across the board. There's been a number of reasons given for that. Most prominently, that women generally shoulder the burden of childcare, and with this unusual homeschool situation, that has been the case in many situations. However, I want to give you the positive side, and I don't mean at all to denigrate the data or the research, because that's absolutely true. But the positive side that I found is I'm a person who pre-pandemic, in order to network, it was always about the happy hours and the golf outings and the 3 martini lunches and things like that were popular in the industry, some of which I had to decline because of I couldn't go flying across the country at a moment's notice, and a little bit what Tricia said in the intro, like she wanted to be home at certain times and not at happy hour every night. But also as a small business owner, and as a woman who maybe wasn't invited to the golf outings or the things like that, this has been a great equalizer, because online networking is something that really only depends on what you have to say and how well you say it. So my competitors, who are much larger and have much more money, they can throw big parties, they can do really flashy things, not during a pandemic though, but I can show my knowledge. I can give my knowledge. I can give everything that I learn and that I know, and I can help, and I can draft those reptile questions for the depositions and throw it on a post in LinkedIn, and content rules the day. And I could do this at 11 o'clock at night in my pajamas, like while I'm eating my Ben and Jerry's or having a glass of wine. So I really think LinkedIn is a wonderful equalizer. There's, of course, other platforms that have become popular. I know Clubhouse is a really big up-and-coming one, but I think the whole idea for women, for small business, for anyone who doesn't want to do that traditional 3 martini lunch kind of networking, online is where it's at, and your relationships will have such a depth. I find I have such a depth. Like Tricia and I met at a conference in 2014, and I thought she was great and she thought I was great, and you know what, that was about the extent of it. But then we met again later online, and our relationship has such depth. And I think that's because of the medium rather than the people. So I really am very, I'm very bullish about online networking.
And I'll add to that, you know, I think if COVID's shown us a lot, it's pulled up the rug and shown us everything that we've been shoving under the rug for decades, years, and the inequality in the family relationships, the gender inequality is one of them. Like Sherry said, it's been highlighted that, you know, women have been primarily responsible for childcare. So when the children are home and you have a two-member household that are both working, it still primarily falls on the female. I consider my relationship with my husband fairly equal, and even we felt that. I felt that I was the primary child carer, and we had to work through lots of discussions and lots of arguments. And we had one last week. Like, it's been a year in. You think we have it figured out, but we don't. I think the practical tip is if you're a single mom, I was raised by a single mom, more power to you, because that's even tougher. But if you're a single mom or you just don't have the equality that you want in your relationship, look for other women that are going through the same thing that you are, team up with them, get help. That's my best tidbit, because I've had to rely on help. This group has been a great help. I lean on them sometimes, especially in the beginning. It was good to hear that other women were going through the same thing that I was going through. So if you find yourself in that situation, that's my one advice. Find other women, get into some sort of group chat. If you can Zoom with them, or if they have resources they can help you, that's what I found helped me out the most.
And so we've been talking a lot about LinkedIn here. You all had the first group on LinkedIn. You both are using it kind of as a platform for your businesses, and I have to say, in both unique and excellent ways, since I'm big fans of both of your posts. But many of us, and I know I've only recently kind of found out how to kind of properly use LinkedIn, I'll say. Obviously, it depends on what each person wants to get out of LinkedIn, but many of us struggle with LinkedIn, and now being remote, trying to establish a connection or trying to figure out how we can differentiate ourselves. Tricia, what would you say to, and I don't know the people in our audience, but what would you say to folks that when we're trying to take this first step and trying to tackle LinkedIn and creating a connection, what kind of advice would you start giving us to start thinking about as we think about LinkedIn in maybe a different way?
So I'll answer that through kind of my story, because I think my story is what a lot of other people's stories are, is that the LinkedIn strategy, the social media strategy that I developed is very much a journey. You will not have it figured out when you start. It changes, and mine changes. Like, it still changes. It evolves and grows on its own. It's like it has a life of its own. But I would say you just start. If you start posting and be consistent with it, that's what I did. If you look back, like, I do a lot of video. If you look back at my first video, oh my God, it was so bad. And when I posted it, I was like cringing. Like, I said to myself, Tricia, you're a trial attorney. You've been in front of judges and juries. Why is this making you so nervous? It's a 30-second video. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I went through my whole, the lack of confidence. I wasn't seeing a lot of lawyers on video on LinkedIn, and I was just like, oh my God, but I did it. And if you take my first video and you compare it to my later videos, it is a world of difference in terms of content, message, and quality. But I only got there because I started. And that's the same with my written post. If you look at my original written post, it was always like, look at this case law out there, and it just didn't hit. And for the first 6 months, my LinkedIn engagement didn't hit. I was getting hardly any likes or comments. I ended up doing a LinkedIn course, but really it was consistency and just being okay, being vulnerable, not getting it right, and not showing up perfect. And it took me a year and a half, basically, for me to find my voice, to find my brand. It was self-work for me, as far as what am I good at? If I look back, I've been litigating for 23 years. And I look back at that, Why are my clients hiring me? What am I good at? I'm not good at everything. And to really narrow in on what I'm good at. And for me, it was, I can see a case very clearly. The whole thing, when a case comes in, I can see it very clearly. And that's my strength. I can do a good deposition, but there are lawyers out there that can do better depositions than me. And I got very clear on what I'm good at. And then I started posting on that. But that was a journey. It didn't happen on day one. It didn't happen on day 365 either. Let me tell you that. It was consistently posting and just letting my voice be heard, what comes out naturally. And that's what I would say to anybody. If you have a goal, first, you should have a goal if you're going to use it on LinkedIn. If you're just going on for fun, then you don't need to take any of this advice. But if you have a goal, if you want to develop business, if you want to increase your follower count, maybe you want to be a speaker one day, or maybe you want to write a book, sit down, identify what your goal is, and start creating content around that goal. Connect with people that help you reach that goal and create content that helps you reach that goal. But don't worry about being perfect. I have typos to this day in my post. People love to call me out on it. I'm totally okay with that. Like, you just got to go with it and be okay just being yourself. But that's a journey. And if you embrace the journey, it is well worth it.
And Tricia, we're finding ourselves in a new normal. And I think even when offices really start opening back up, we're going to see more of a hybrid work model. Many companies and law firms have said folks can continuously work from home. So for some of the younger members of the legal profession who may not be as established, what advice can you give them about, in this new normal, how can they, make a name for themselves? And for someone who might be more introverted, who doesn't already have a connection online with a group, or is looking for ways to even start. I'm sure it can seem very intimidating. And for all of our speakers today, you're all incredibly accomplished women, and again, have been able to pivot during this difficult time. But what are some basic things that maybe our younger members that are looking for mentorship, or looking for guidance, maybe we could talk to that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I think fundamentally is to create content. I think the younger generation is probably more familiar with the totality of the mediums available to them than I am. Like, for me, it's LinkedIn, and I do have a YouTube channel, but I don't really pour as much time into that. But I think to create content around what you do, if you're a leader or whatever, if you're a paralegal, what do you think could help out other paralegals? Or, if you want to be a supervisor, talk about what it means to be a paralegal supervisor. I mean, it's really sitting down and identifying what value you can help out with other people and creating content. That could be a written blog, that could be a video series, that could be a post on LinkedIn, that could be Instagram with different photos. The Clubhouse. I have not been on Clubhouse. Sherry, I think, is on Clubhouse. But, getting on and into those rooms and commenting, getting on podcasts, creating a podcast. It is really content. Put yourself out there, because it is the only way to separate yourself out. People will see you for who you are, as an expert in your field. And if you do that consistently, like, everybody looks at Sherry now, she's the expert jury consultant, because she just constantly creates content that helps people with that genre. And so when I think of, I need a jury consultant, I automatically think of Sherry because of her content. Well, I like her as well, but it's really her content that I remember. And for me, I'm a GL attorney, and I know people will say, well, I need a GL attorney in Pennsylvania. Well, I see Tricia everywhere. Like, I'll give her a call. I mean, that's my ideal situation. But that is really that. Start with a content strategy, and it can be through whatever medium you're comfortable with. I started a podcast because I love podcasts. And I'm like, I understand that medium. I listen to like 7 or 8 a week. Like, I could start a podcast. Maybe that's not for you. Maybe you don't really like to talk to people, but maybe a written blog. Maybe you're a really good writer and a written blog, and you can submit it to law.com or whatever trade industry magazine that there is out there. But that's my one piece of advice, is start creating content.
So Sherry, we're talking about creating content. We've talked a lot about innovation here, both, especially you, with kind of finding your way, figuring out what you're turning your side hustle into kind of what you're doing now. I think that was something we talked about last time we were together, that you kept calling it your side hustle, right? And hearing what Trisha's been doing, it's like authenticity keeps reigning through on this conversation. It's being true to yourself, finding your voice, but taking something that you are passionate about and kind of putting yourself there. Now, that's very intimidating to a lot of us. Maybe not a lot of us would actually do that, but maybe you can have some inspiration here to the folks listening today about maybe they have a side hustle, how you kind of, in hindsight, are thinking about that, or maybe some tips or advice that you can give the audience today that you can take away from your experience.
Sure. So it's kind of a funny story, and I wrote about it. I memorialized it in Network. Is my very good friend who is a life coach for lawyers. I would highly recommend reading her chapter, Olivia Vizicaro. She actually metaphorically pulled me aside and said, stop calling it your side hustle, because then it's going to always be your side hustle. You're the CEO of Sherry Bellett's Communications. Please act like it. So that was my wake-up call, and that's also my plug. Read her chapter. It's very inspiring. But I would give advice to people who are starting out on LinkedIn, or advice to people, especially young lawyers or maybe law students who find themselves in this pandemic and in a situation where it's quite unusual. What I would say, and I'm going to use someone as an example, she's a law student who I met through, I was giving a boot camp for, there was a boot camp that one of the women put together and just got a bunch of speakers together, and it was for law students. So anyway, she was a law student, and she was very interested in psychology and the law. So she contacted me after, and she wrote a piece about what I was speaking about, and she put it on LinkedIn, and she wrote a piece about a couple of other people and what they were speaking about, and put it on LinkedIn, and then just got really involved in our posts. And it really reminded me a lot of me when I was starting out on LinkedIn. Of course, I was, working for many years when I started out, but I remember seeing something about social inflation and nuclear verdicts, and I got so excited because I was reading about this, and I was researching it, and I was looking at all the statistics, and I really felt like I had something to say, and I had something like very extensive to say. So I opened up a Microsoft document, and I looked at the post, and I just started drafting something and talking about all the points, and I just put it in the post. And the whole act of doing that, just like the whole act of this law student who really just put herself out there and just started getting involved, is really, I would say, 75% of it. Because once you start doing something, it just starts building. Like, she would be top of mind for me if I needed I believe she's in law school now, but if she was looking to do something, psychology and the law, she would absolutely be top of mind for me when she graduates. And just like I started speaking about social inflation and nuclear verdicts, I think I was top of mind for people because I gave this answer, and then I kept looking for these posts that talked about it, and I talked about it, and Trisha brought me on The Defense Never Rests to discuss it, and it just kind of starts snowballing. So if you start with something that you're really interested in, even if it's like a tiny little comment, say someone posts something about MedMal and you're really interested in the topic, and you just post a little comment or you post a question, and I'll still post questions. I saw a post of someone who tried a pandemic trial in Nassau County, New York, which is very unusual, an in-person trial in New York. And right away I asked him, I said, hey, were you able to voir dire on vaccines? What's the story? Were people vaccinated on the jury? And ideas started spinning, and he gave me a great answer, and we were DMing back and forth. So I just really think showing interest and asking questions or getting out there if there's something you know and you're passionate about, and just putting yourself out there. People are going to respond. People are really nice. They want to help you. They're interested in what you have to say, and just to have the confidence to say it. Like, I thought nothing about asking this trial lawyer, like, hey, like, what's the deal? Like, did you put vaccines in your questionnaires? Whereas maybe when I was starting out on LinkedIn, I would be like, oh, wow, this is like a famous trial lawyer. How can I dare ask him a question? What if it's embarrassing? What if it's wrong? What if he thinks I'm stupid? And it's just like, no one's going to, like, if you're not extremely rude or offensive, I think people really enjoy interacting. So that's my long rambling advice answer.
And, if you had to go back and talk to your pre-COVID self as you were getting into the pandemic, what would you actually do differently? What is one thing you might actually, going back over the last 12 months, do differently?
I would have colored my hair instead of put it off. That is number one. I would have colored my hair. I would have got that pedicure, and then I would have bought every box of that hair color. That is number one. But number two, I mean, really, I would have just had and it's hard to tell yourself, have the confidence. I would have, if I had to go back, I'd say, you could do this. And I would say to myself, look, don't get hung up on what you can't do. Think about what you can do. Like, yes, you probably are not going to be a website builder extraordinaire. No one is going to hire you at Google to do engineering. That's okay. You're good at what you do. And just like Trisha was saying, and Trisha's written extensively, she's kind of modest, so I'm going to shout her out. So she says, oh, maybe I'm not the best at taking a deposition, but I can look at something really clearly when I get a GL case. And she posted about it today on LinkedIn. But she's written a book about this. She's written a free book for insurance and claims professionals, The 25 Factors. Correct me if I'm getting the title wrong. She's done a program, 60 Days to Clarity. Like, she's really good at that. And you know what? I'm really good at what I do. No one's asking me to build a website. I mean, that would be a shame if they were. That would be embarrassing. But it's just like, you know what? Like I'm okay with that. I can send a Zoom invite now. I'm good. I'm learning how to put it on the calendar, and that's totally fine because I'm confident with what I can do, and what I can't do, I will ask for help.
And I'll add to that too. Thank you, Sherry. I love presenting with Sherry. She always plugs me. It's like the best advertisement. But I'll add to that too is, for me, I recognized that I needed help with certain endeavors, and I just waited. Like, I would have started things earlier, and I would have asked for help earlier. Like, I wanted to do a podcast for 1.5 years before I actually took action. 1.5 years I sat on it. And I'm like, why did I sit on it? Because I was afraid. Like, I didn't know it was the right thing to do. I didn't know if I'd be good at it. And looking back, I'm like, that was 1.5 years wasted. I should have started that earlier. And then I started this LinkedIn social media marketing campaign strategy, not even knowing what the hell that was. And it was a DIY effort. And eventually I got a coach to help me. I'm like, why didn't I get a coach in the beginning? Like, it was asking for help when I was going into uncharted territory. I would have done those things sooner, but it is a journey. And looking back, I actually wouldn't actually change anything. Now I know to recognize when there's fear popping up, and to address it head on and not let me stop me or delay me. And when I get into an area that I've never gotten to before, if somebody has already walked that walk, to reach out to them, whether you pay them or you just, find a mentor for you that's not paid, either one. But most things, the path has already been paved to some extent. You can get help from people, and that I would have done that sooner.
Well, I know we're getting close to the end of our program, and if anyone has questions, we're happy to answer them. Teresa, did you have any last questions for the panelists before we wrap up?
I don't know if it's a question. I mean, I just think, you know, we only have two of the authors here of #Networked, and I know we mentioned Olivia's chapter. It really, I mean, I just have to say, I was really inspired when I read the book back in December. Yes, and just to hear the various stories, you know, everyone's background, everyone's different, you know, paths, and everyone's different issues. It really was just remarkable. But what's really fascinating is that you actually wrote a book during the pandemic. I mean, that's just unbelievable. And
that was not easy, by the way.
Yeah, scheduling and everything. It's just, it's really incredible. And so, I mean, if anything, if people should take at least one thing away from today, it's just inspiration from what you all have been able to do, and that it is possible, right? So, you know, believe in yourself, because I feel like once you start with that negative train of thought, it's just easy to fall right into that. So be positive, and you know, just take a look at this book, and it is inspiring. And I hate to sound kind of corny in that sense, but it's true. I found it very inspiring to read about what you did, and learning also, you know, wow, you know, I can use this platform to maybe have more of an equal footing here on LinkedIn, for example. And that was something for me personally in you know, my career where I'm at now. It's something that I think I can use. And so I wanted to tell Sherry and Trisha and all the other authors out there, thank you for doing this. It's helped some of us, and I think it will continue to help a lot of us, especially women, as we continue to try and find our paths with the unknown future and probably ever changed future of offices and way we network, and the ability to pivot, right? And switch gears and be able to change things, and basically our mindset, change our mindset, and be able to maybe tackle some of those fears that we have inside, and just, you know, start by creating content on LinkedIn. So I just wanted to say thank you for that inspiration. It really did mean a lot to me personally, and I'm able to come here and sit with you today. It's been great.
Well, and the other thing I should say, what's also remarkable is not only did these women write this book during the pandemic with all of the other things they had to take care of at home, with kids learning online and working from home, living during all of this, but that they are donating all the proceeds to the book to the National Women's Law Center, which I think is such a generous contribution and speaks volumes about these women. And I think Sherry underscored the fact that, you know, just by giving back, by paying it forward, and by offering free content online and really putting yourself out there in that way, can reap tremendous rewards that I'm sure Trisha and Sherry and the other authors of the book didn't even expect when you first entered into this journey. So if you wanted to say maybe something about the charity and the good work that you're doing for it, I think it's a wonderful contribution.
It is. We thought it was a really appropriate charity. We always knew we were going to donate to a charity. That was sort of the plan. This book was not like, oh, let's like write the next Harry Potter and become like gazillionaires. The book really serves a broader purpose. I know we all felt very like I said, I could have written my chapter. It could have never been published, and it would have been like just such a good feeling for me to just get all of that down on paper and just sort of analyze my life and career. So I think it really served a broader purpose for all of us. So we made the decision to choose a women's charity for lawyers. It seemed like an appropriate type of organization. And we're really thrilled about that. It's exciting.
And I should say this just in, I feel like I'm on a newscast with late breaking news, but my company, BIA, will gladly purchase a book for anyone that's attending today. If you just want to email me, we're happy to do that.
So nice.
It's a contribution we'd like to make, and also to thank all of you for your time and your willingness to, again, come to this forum and share what you've learned and how this hashtag network has brought all these wonderful women together and helped them during the pandemic. So we can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much. That's really,
Yes.
That's so generous. That's really,
That's awesome.
That's incredible, Colleen. And I just want to get in a plug for my friend, Brian Schrader, who's the founder of BIA. And we graduated from law school together. We were all taking our notes on notebooks. Brian had a laptop and he started one of the first e-discovery companies. But when I ran into him at the 20-year reunion a couple of years ago, he was so generous with his advice and his knowledge. And I just think his mission and BIA's mission is very aligned with women and diversity, inclusion, equity. And I've spent a lot of time at BIA before the pandemic. And I really admire the company. So thank you to BIA and Colleen, and thank you, Teresa and ACEDS and Mark and Mike and everyone sitting in the background. It's just wonderful to be a part of this.
Well, we could say also on that note, there are the men that support the women. So thank you to all the men who are also supporting all of us. To your point, Sherry, Brian and Mark were very good to me during the pandemic. I had to pivot. Not only did they help create a position for me at BIA, but they were very good to some of my clients that were displaced and needed kind of homes for their cases. So I'm very grateful as well. And I think it's wonderful when you work for an organization that empowers women, that has provided this platform for me and you all today to do this with our ACEDS partnership. And again, supports diversity and inclusion as well. These are all very important topics and themes that we're all experiencing kind of in this new normal. So we hope everyone that attended today found this to be very helpful and meaningful to yourselves, both personally and professionally. And there are LinkedIn, you can link in with any one of us. I believe that Deja has put our LinkedIn profiles on the chat available to everyone that attended. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Thank you, Shari. Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Trish. And thank you to everyone for joining us. A great conversation today. ACEDS, as you know, is a huge supporter of diversity and inclusion initiatives. I want to thank our sponsor, BIA, trusted e-discovery advisors for more years than I care to recount. Simply because I'm too old in this industry. Thank you to them for sponsoring today. And of course, thank you to each of you and everyone who attended for a great presentation. Please visit aceds.org for a complete list of our upcoming webinars. Have a great day, everyone, and be kind to one another.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.